over 55 years, your source for agribusiness news and features from around the Southeast and across the country, focusing on one of the nation's top industries, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by the Georgia Farm Bureau in association with Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College.
All right, thanks so much for tuning into the Farm Monitor. That's Jennifer, I'm Ray, and if I was a betting man, which I am not, I'd bet all of Jennifer's next paycheck that you're gonna like what we have in store for you today.
Yeah, nice try. Every penny of that paycheck is already accounted for. Anywho, here's what's coming up on this week's show. With dry days ahead, is your irrigation system ready to deliver? Why a preseason check could make or break your yield. Tree planting in Georgia isn't as simple as digging a hole. Coming up, why timing, technique, and stewardship all play a role in growing our timber future. Plus,
well, everybody, Ranger Nick here. Coming up a little bit later, I'm hanging out in Vidalia country, Toombs County. We're talking everything that makes this wonderful vegetable so sweet and a whole lot more. That and so much more starts right now on the Farm Monitor.
No matter how much time or effort they put into a crop, growers know it can't reach its full potential without the proper amount of water. That's why getting irrigation systems ready for the upcoming growing season is such a priority. Damon Jones tells you why it's especially important this year and why now is the best time to get started.
It's no secret that water is the most valuable commodity for the tens of thousands of farmers around Georgia. And with a drier than normal growing season in the forecast, having a reliable source from day one is essential to maximizing yield.
If we get up and get to going and it's dry like that, every day that we lose and every day that we're behind is another day that our crop's losing yield potential. So what we want to make sure is that we first have good uniformity on that system. If we've not checked uniformity on that system in the past 5 years, we should really consider doing that. Once you're confident that the system's uniform and doing well, then it's time to make sure that we're utilizing some sort of advanced irrigation scheduling to match the crop in that season, whether it's the UGA checkbook, whether it's the soil moisture sensor, whether it's some sort of irrigation scheduling app, et cetera, to match what we need during the season.
Getting an early start on that troubleshooting is of utmost importance this year after farmers saw an anything but mild winter.
We had some unusually cooler weather this year in Georgia and in South Georgia where we had days in the 20s that we normally don't have, and even the lower 20s as you moved up in the state, maybe even temperatures in the teens. And if we didn't do a good job of draining those systems and getting all that water out, we probably are going to find some issues residual from that cold temperature and those cold weather. So we want to make sure that, that we can help address those now prior to needing it on the crop.
As for those debating whether or not irrigation pivots are worth the investment, Porter says it all depends on your situation.
It's costly now. Prices of everything have went up, but it's also costly when we have those episodic droughts that move in and we lose yield potential. And so irrigation is still very valid and the investment in irrigation is worthwhile. You just need to do some homework like this on, system design, water source, dealer support, what tech package you want on it, et cetera, and that'll help you make that final decision.
If that decision is yes, then there are a number of factors that need to be considered before choosing which system to go with.
Check water source first, then go look at and see, okay, what do I need? What crop am I going to be irrigating it? How am I going to design it? What type of sprinklers do I want? Am I going to be doing chemigation or fertigation at all on it, et cetera? Do I want the remote monitoring and control? And to me, what it really goes back to, we have 3 or 4 really good brands of center pivots that you can buy in the state of Georgia. You just need to go to your local dealer that works best in your area.
With how much these systems have developed over just the past decade, operating them has never been easier.
I think one of the biggest advancements we have now is remote monitoring and control. Right, we have other options on them, but really a lot of our farmers have adopted a remote monitoring and control because now we can see, hey, I've started my system up, is it still running all night? Because we can't run the systems in 4 hours and be done.
Reporting from Tifton, I'm Damon Jones for the Farm Monitor.
In other ag news, the USDA's Prospective Plantings Report shows farmers intend to plant more corn and cut back on soybean acres. According to the report, corn acreage is set to rise over 5% from last year to 95.3 million acres, making it the third largest since 1944 and the biggest since 2013. Cotton, meanwhile, saw the sharpest decline, dropping 12% to 9.9 million acres. Betty Resnick, an economist for the American Farm Bureau Federation, says there are several factors likely behind the change in planting plans for 2025.
I think this year might have even more uncertainty than normal around the quickly escalating trade war and the big question marks in the biofuel policy space. These dual concerns and uncertainties with sliding prices as well for soybeans, I think, led to some of the significant drop in soybean acres. And the cotton profitability picture has been pretty bleak recently, and that's definitely also showing up in the big drop in a percentage basis of cotton acres.
Tree planting season may be behind us here in Georgia, but the work done over the winter is already paying off, laying the groundwork for a strong future in forestry.
John Holcomb takes us to Baldwin County for a closer look at how it all comes together.
Here in Baldwin County, these guys are hard at work hand planting pine trees, a crucial step in Georgia's reforestation process. However, that process isn't an easy one. In fact, it's a multi-step process that foresters across the state follow closely, starting with clearing out the competition, giving the seedlings the best chance to survive.
So after a clear cut, you've got all this, influx of sunlight that's going to get a lot of things growing that weren't growing when it was a forested stand. So you got to get rid of all that competing vegetation, or it's going to outcompete your pine trees, and you're going to have poor survival. So they do a broadcast chemical treatment that kills all that vegetation, and then so you let that chemical, work for about 2 months, and then you're ready to do actually put the trees in the ground during the winter time. So the time frame on those steps are: the chemical site prep treatment is in the summer. You're going to do your burning in the fall, roughly 2 months after the chemical treatment, and then you're going to plant the trees.
According to McMullen, once the site is ready, the winter is the most ideal time of year for planting, as the moist soil allows the seedlings to take root.
Generally, it's wet in the winter, it's cool, you're going to get the trees in the ground while there's plenty of moisture, and they have time to start spreading the roots and getting established before it turns dry in the spring and summer. We are planting containerized seedlings here, so they're going to be more drought resistant versus bare root seedlings. But yeah, it just helps them get established before it gets hot and dry in the summer.
From there, McMullen says management is the key to success, as the ultimate goal is ensuring the trees are able to thrive.
Our next potential step would be in the spring, this coming spring, doing a herbaceous weed control treatment, and that's a follow-up chemical treatment to knock back any weeds or competing vegetation that may try to come up this spring. After that, with loblolly pine, you really just let them grow for about 15 years, and then you're going to be looking at doing your first commercial thinning operation.
According to McMullen, however, while the timing and technique are important parts of the process, it's the big picture that matters most to Georgia's forestry industry, and is one that's typically misunderstood.
I have people ask me about, are we running out of trees? Why are you cutting down the trees? The trees are, they're a crop. They're planted for the purpose of harvesting. So the bigger issue is if you were to, clear cut something and not plant it back. Here, replanting trees, that's being a good steward of the land, getting the land back in a productive state, and helping, our thriving timber economy continue to thrive.
Reporting in Milledgeville for the Farm Monitor, I'm John Holcomb.
Well, everybody, Ranger Nick coming up. I'm in Vidalia country. What makes those onions so sweet, and why is it that when we cut them, we don't cry? I got the answer after this.
Hey y'all, we want to take a moment to send a special greeting to all of you and a wish that the Easter season will be filled with many blessings for you and your family. Easter Sunday is coming, and it's the day we mark as a celebration of Christ's resurrection. This is a time of reflection, renewal, and great hope. At a time when our world may seem uncertain to so many, Easter provides a reason we can keep moving forward. So it is our hope you find this as a time of peace and comfort. Have a blessed Easter.
Did you know that Vidalia onions are the official state vegetable of Georgia? Let's find out what makes them so special. Vidalia onions are a hybrid variety called yellow Granax. Grown anywhere else, you get a regular yellow onion. But here, the combination of mild winter temperatures, plenty of rain, and unique soil make the Vidalia onion truly special. Sulfur in the soil makes most onions spicy and pungent. But plenty of rainfall helps to wash the sulfur from the sandy South Georgia soil to the clay below the surface. The result is a plump, mild, and sweet onion with high water content, another secret to the Vidalia onion's famous flavor. Growing onions is a year-round process. Transplants are planted in September, which is the end of the previous growing season. Once they become seedlings, these field-grown transplants are moved by workers into field rows where they will mature. South Georgia has mild short days in winter, which Vidalia onions need for early growth. There are 20 Georgia counties that grow genuine Vidalia onions. About 80,000 seedlings are planted per acre, and there are 12,000 acres of farmland. It takes a lot of workers to harvest Vidalia onions. They would clip the onions by hand and load them into trailers and transport them to be processed. The onions are sorted by size and weight, inspected for quality, and then they are boxed or bagged before they are sent to stores all over the country. Vidalia onions can be eaten raw or cooked with your favorite dishes. They are fat-free, cholesterol-free, and sodium-free food that provides a good source of vitamin C. Be sure to bring home sweet Vidalia onions the next time you go to the market.
Holding a juvenile Juro spider. Until next time, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you, like I always do, that enthusiasm is contagious. Well, look at these beautiful onion sprouts right here. You know, most of the time when I think about onions, I immediately get a little bit emotional. Most of us start crying those tears because of cutting up those onions. But there's an onion in Georgia, the Vidalia onion, our state vegetable, that's a little bit different, that sweet onion. And someone to tell us a thing or two about that wonderful vegetable is Chris Tyson. Hey, Chris, good to be with you today.
Nice to be here.
I tell you what, you talk about an expert on onions and the sweetness of those. So Chris Tyson is the area onion agent down here in Toombs County and this area, as well as the superintendent of the Vidalia Onion and Vegetable Research Center down here. And I tell you what, Chris, if I'm going to ask anybody this question, it's going to be you. What makes these beautiful Vidalia onions so darn sweet? What is it? Talk to us about that.
Well, there's several things that go into making a Vidalia onion what it is and giving it its sweet flavor. One thing is our geographic area. South Georgia, and particularly a 20 county region right around Vidalia that has sandy soils that leach sulfur, and sulfur is what gives onions a hot flavor. And our soils don't hold a lot of sulfur, and so that helps give our onions a sweet flavor.
Well, and the cool thing about that, I think, in this box that we're standing in front of right here, Chris, I want to bend down here with you and show everybody at home. So at the research center, they are studying this aspect of leaching of that soil and that sulfur. So one of the things you're studying here is the clay depth. Why would that influence flavor depending on where that clay is?
Well, typically with Vidalia onions, the sandier the soil, the sweeter the flavor it gives.
Okay.
And so there are some differences in our soil types in our area, although as a generality, most of them are sandier, but we found that soil types from field to field can influence flavor some.
And it will vary.
It can vary. And so the other component of giving an onion its sweet flavor also has to do with how we fertilize it. And so what we can do is the more we know about our soil in the field, we can fertilize it just the right amount to help give it the sweetest flavor and also grow the best onion as well.
And isn't that incredible? Before we move on to learn more about what they're researching here specifically, why is it that when my wife and I cut into a Vidalia onion, we don't cry nearly as much or at all? What is that?
Well, the part of the onion flavor that makes you cry is something called lacrimatory factor. And we have lacrimatory ducts in our eyes that stimulate tearing when it senses something hot. But however, Vidalia onions are very low in that lacrimatory factor.
Well, we've made our way out to a field here at the Research Center. Take a look at this. Can you see the contrast between these onions and these? Chris, you were telling me a second ago, these are unfertilized, these are fertilized.
Yes.
Cool stuff, the value of fertilizer. But now what are you studying with fertilizer specifically?
Well, some of the things that we're looking at with fertilizer is the amount. Over the years, we've been able to help growers reduce the amount of nitrogen that they use on onions, reducing their input costs, but it also helps with the quality and the flavor of the onion. That's one thing, is the amount. The other thing that we look at, that we've looked at recently, would be the timing. When's the best time to apply certain amounts or certain types of fertilizer during the crop cycle.
Interesting. Now, thinking about fertilizer and thinking about that fertilizer going down and leaching, thinking about rainfall, I'm thinking about the folks at home. It's been a dry year or it's been a wet year. How might that influence the flavor of this great Vidalia onion? What would you say?
Well, typically with Vidalias, in a wetter year when we have more rainfall, that would lend itself probably to a little bit sweeter onion because, sulfur is what gives onions their hot flavor. And sulfur leaches or washes out with rainfall or irrigation. It washes out easily from our soils. So in a year when we get more rainfall, more of that sulfur is leached out of the soil. There's less available to be in the plant and give it that hot flavor. So in a wetter year with more rainfall, we could have sweeter onions.
All right, so Chris, for the folks at home, they're looking at this beautiful field of onions and these beautiful rows. Why the different colored stakes that we have out here? What are you doing in these rows?
Well, this field of onions is full of small plots that are just 20 feet long and 6 feet wide. And there's hundreds of plots out here. And these are all used for research. So we're looking at lots of different things out here, but one of the big things we do is variety evaluation. There's several, upwards of 30 or more varieties of onions that can be grown here and called Vidalias. And so what we do is we help to evaluate new varieties, evaluate old varieties, compare them to new ones to make sure that they meet the standards, the sweetness, and also make sure that they're good performers, they yield well, and they produce well. And so that's a big part of what we do here is evaluate these varieties and compare them to one another and also test them for flavor as well.
Well, and you think about the standards of the Vidalia onion, and we were talking off camera about the value in this research. If you wonder, well, why are we studying this onion? It's already been perfected. It's a wonderful taste. Well, Chris is looking at things like the amount of fertilizer it might take to get that same level of sweetness. And when we talk about sweetness, we're not talking about Chris walking up and down the aisles and taking bites of onions. How are you studying sweetness?
Well, a big part of what we do, all the varieties that we evaluate, we send to a laboratory that we've developed at the University of Georgia, where we can analyze the chemical compounds in that onion. And we've got some thresholds that we've developed based on consumer taste testing that we can test these onions against. And so we can test these onions in the lab and say, that's a good sweet onion, or this one's kind of hot. We don't need, this one shouldn't be a Vidalia.
And that's so interesting, the chemistry behind this. If you got somebody at home that's interested in chemistry and putting that with agriculture, we can do that, I gotta tell you, Chris, thank you so much for today. This has been just eye-opening to me, these things, and what we're studying about Vidalia onions. Well, y'all know what to do at home. While you're online looking up more recipes about Vidalia onions, check out the Ranger Nick Facebook page, see what I got going on. And until next time, Chris, as we always say, I'm Ranger Nick for the Farm Monitor, reminding you that enthusiasm is contagious. So pass it on. Y'all, thanks so much for watching, and hey, look. We'll see you right back here again this time next month. See ya. Holding a juvenile Juro spider. Until next time, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you, like I always do, that enthusiasm is contagious.
Nick, great work as always, buddy. Hey, one of the things we try to do here is make sure you don't miss a thing. So if you ever want to catch up on something from today's show, or maybe just revisit one of your favorite stories, head on over to the Farm Monitor YouTube page. We've got everything from inspiring farmer stories to the behind-the-scenes look at the ag world, and Of course, the archive goes all the way back to 2009. And while you're online, swing by the Farm Monitor Facebook page and give us a like. We always enjoy staying connected with y'all, so if you got a story idea, maybe you just want to say hello or share a thought, drop us a message on Facebook or shoot us an email at news@farm-monitor.com. We would love to hear from you.
When we come back, tiny snails, big problems. How one pesky parasite is threatening catfish farms and what researchers are doing to fight back. Finally this week, raising catfish isn't just a southern tradition. It's a big business, especially right here in Georgia. But did you know that a tiny parasite is causing big problems for catfish farmers across the country? It's been wiping out entire ponds, and until now, beating it during the hot summer months has been almost impossible. But there's some encouraging news out of USDA that could make a big difference.
Catfish is a global commodity. It is extremely important for the regional economy, and one of the major issues that the catfish industry deals with is parasites and disease. And one of the primary parasites we're fighting is actually transmitted by a snail that's in the pond. Bulbophorus, even in light infections, can reduce the productivity of a pond and reduce profits by up to 20%. As you move into moderate and severe infections, you're looking at 40 to 60% reductions in profit. The catfish industry functions on pretty slim margins as it is. A catfish being sold may only profit the farmer 15 to 20 cents a pound. So if this disease continues and it's not mitigated, this could be a collapse of the catfish industry itself. These snails can cause a lot of problems in novel systems where you wouldn't expect them to be. The snails do burrow into the mud to overwinter, so even if you rework a pond during the winter months, when the water comes in and the water starts to warm up, they'll crawl back out of the mud and you already have snails in the system. They can also be transported to new ponds on farm equipment, seines, tractors, paddle wheels, whatever the case may be. And then they can also latch onto the feed of birds if you have wading birds coming from other ponds, hiding in the feathers of those birds. So there are a lot of different ways that these snails can be moved from pond to pond and farm to farm. Copper sulfate is one of the leading chemicals that we use in the catfish industry, and it's used for a wide variety of things, whether that's algae control or pest management. And one of the primary uses is to control snails in catfish ponds. The problem is when we use copper sulfate in warmer temperatures, so think of it, midsummer, that copper is also toxic to the catfish. And so our goal is to find some lower dose applications or new management techniques that we can use that's a safer alternative for the catfish and still getting the same result of treating the snails themselves. The results of this study so far are that the lower dose copper sulfate treatments, particularly those that are about the same levels as what we use for algal control on a regular basis, if we span those out over the course of 4 weeks rather than one high dose, we do achieve similar mortality rates in the snails. And even those snails that don't actually die, we're able to reduce their reproduction and growth. So we're stagnating the populations and reducing that potential parasite vector, even without true mortality. We've conducted some of the first macroinvertebrate community analyses in these catfish ponds, something that's never really been done in the past. The catfish ponds are typically thought of as a very simple system. Most people only think of the catfish that are in there, but these systems are extremely complex. You have everything from phytoplankton, zooplankton, bugs, fish, birds are around the ponds, other scavengers. So having a better understanding of what's in the system year-round gives us a much better idea of how that pond functions and how managing that pond may contribute to other factors.
Our thanks to USDA for that, and thank you for making the show possible.
For everyone here at the show, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next time right here on the Farm Monitor. Have a great week.